So this here is the new ladder that we are going to be installing. This here is made by Westcott Designs. This is a very new ladder. I don't think there's any information on the market for it so far, but we're going to show you guys the install and then show you guys what's cool about it and so on. These are going to be everything that's included in the kit. Obviously the ladder, and then this is going to be the top plate, bottom plate with this bend, 3 bolts, washers, and nylon locking nuts. We got this weather strip to prevent scratching on the bottom. This here is a flat, basically big washer, really. Washer slash nut that's gonna go on the back side of the tailgate, and then the last step on the ladder, which is gonna go right here. And another cool thing about this ladder is that this is gonna come already pre-assembled. That way you don't have to assemble the actual ladder, you just have to pretty much mount it onto your vehicle. So step 1, we are gonna be working on the top plate. Very first thing you want to do is take off these 2 bolts right here on the very bottom, and it is a size 3/32 Allen head. So just go ahead and loosen those. On the back of this is double-sided tape, which is already applied for you. The only thing that isn't applied is pretty much the back side of these tabs. But we are gonna go ahead and apply some right there, just because it is gonna be touching the metal on the tailgate. So what we have here is a 1/2 inch double-sided 3M tape applied to the back side of those tabs that we have mentioned. You can also apply it to the back of the hatch if you want to, but we figured applying it now would just be a little bit easier. That way we don't have to deal with it when we get it up there. So before, we did have the C4 ladder up here. We did not do a very good job at applying enough double-sided tape, and you can see here it actually scratched up the paint a little bit. So it is really nice that Westcott Designs actually applied the tape for you, and it actually covers a lot, so that way you don't have this issue. But what we're gonna do now is we are actually gonna clean it with some isopropyl alcohol. We added a little bit on this rag, and we have cleaned it pretty well, enough to have the double-sided tape stick really well on here. Next, we are going to be applying the top plate here, and what we're going to do is we are going to be measuring from this very edge to the edge of the top plate, and we want about 3.5 inches from edge to edge. So once we have about 3.5 inches, we will go ahead and make a mark, or you can just go ahead and lift the top plate off, peel the double-sided tape, and then apply it. Next step, we are going to be removing the backside of the double-sided tape, including the ones that we applied, and a pair of needle nose might come in handy here if you can't reach. And then we'll go ahead and glide it or slide it in there, gently get around the edge here without sticking to the back of that. And then once we have lined up with the tape, we can go ahead and push all the way towards the lip. Remember to pull it all the way towards the hatch, towards the rear. Once we're there, we can go ahead and apply pressure downwards. And then from here, apply a lot of pressure for over amount of time, just to make sure it stays down. So once we have this completely installed, the lip of this should be all the way against the hatch. and then you can go ahead and remove your tape. So after you have the top plate installed, your very outer bracket should be right in the middle of your hinge right there, and then the other one should be to the right of this rubber grommet right here. Next, we are going to be installing those little bolts that we took out. So what we're going to do now is we're going to apply a little bit of Loctite on it just to prevent it from going anywhere. You obviously don't have to do this part, but we're just going to take the precaution and go ahead and do this. So once you get it pretty much maxed out, you're going to want to hold your Allen, and then with a open end, just tighten that nut to lock it in place. So if you have an Allen head with a ball tip on it, it's going to come in real helpful, just because the angle of the hatch and this will not allow you to use a straight Allen. And then over here is going to be a little bit hard, but it's definitely doable to get maybe a quarter of a turn with the open end wrench. Next, we're going to be applying some masking tape to the body line right here. And where we're applying is, if you look at the 4 on 4Runner, just come straight down. We're going to apply it all the way over here. Doesn't have to be too much, but we're going to do maybe 2-3 layers. And the reason for that is we're going to mock up the ladder, and we don't want it to scratch the paint while it's being mocked up, so we're just going to apply a couple layers there. Next, grab your ladder, and we are just going to put it right over the top plate. And then coming down here, I'll show you why we apply that tape right there. So it is going to touch just right there. So what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and loosely put in the top bolts on the top plate. Coming to the top here, we are going to be installing the bolts, washer, and nylon locking nut. Go ahead and push that through. Get your hand underneath there and apply that. Once we have all 3 of these in there, we can go ahead and snug them down. The Allen head is a 7/32, and the bolt head is going to be a 9/16. So just go ahead and snug them down first, and then we'll tighten them all the way later. Next, we are going to measure and mark where our ladder ends. And right now we are exactly at 9 inches. So we went ahead and put a mark there. That way we know where our ladder is going to sit. So as you can see here, it does slightly cover the front of the 4. So if you wanted to, you could move the top plate over maybe a quarter of an inch, and then that will put you about maybe half an inch over down here. That way, if you wanted to, you could have the 4 showing. But we're okay with this just because it was easy numbers, 3.5 on top, 9 inches on the bottom, and this is what we're gonna go with. Next, we're gonna be working on the bottom plate. And what we are doing now is just removing these T-nuts from the bottom. And what we're gonna do with those is actually we are going to put them into the last step here. So once we have those all off, grab those T-nuts, and then with the high side down, the smooth side up, we'll slide these in here. So we'll have 3 on each side of this slot. So next, we'll grab our last step here, and we'll just take the bolts on the very end. It is a 4mm Allen head, so we'll just go ahead and do that real quick. Next, we'll need the bottom plate and the last step. What we're going to do is we're going to assemble these 2 together. So if you can have a small pick or a really small screwdriver, just move them in the general position. Align the bottom plate with the last step, grabbing your 4mm and just trying to start them. Next, we'll grab our weather stripping. We'll go ahead and just slide it into the hatch lip. Slide it over roughly where it's gonna sit. You can always adjust it to get it exact in a little bit. Once you have all the bolts installed on the bottom plate, we'll go ahead and get it installed onto the ladder itself. So we'll just get it lined up, and then we'll have to pull the ladder away from the vehicle to get the lines to, or to get the holes to line up, and then go ahead and install the bolts that you took off the last step, and then we'll just snug them down at this point, and then we'll tighten everything at the end. After you have the 2 bolts on each side of the last step, you can go ahead and tighten the bottom plate all the way down. At this point, we pretty much have the ladder all done, and already we can already tell this thing is a lot sturdier just because it doesn't move at all, and we haven't even drilled into the hatch yet. But I think because of the way this is designed and it wraps around the entire hatch, and the weather stripping piece that's actually in there makes it a lot sturdier. This thing is solid, it's not going anywhere, and I like it already. Alright, next step, we are going to center punch the holes on the bottom plate here. We're going to be using a 21/64 drill bit to make the holes. Next, we are going to be installing this bar into that hole where the handle was, and that's going to just basically cinch the bottom plate with that bar. So we'll go ahead and put that bar in there. The flat side is going to be towards the metal, and then we'll just look through the hole to find the nut on that bar, install the bolts. Next, we are going to be installing the handle trim back in here, just because the bottom piece does go right over it. And then we can go ahead and tighten the bolt down. The bolt is a 1/2 inch socket, so you can go ahead and just put a socket on there and tighten it all the way down. The last thing we are going to tighten up is going to be the very top plate. Those nuts down there, if you haven't done so already, at this point will be a good time to go ahead and tighten them all down. This is it, guys. We are all done. Everything is tightened up. The clearance on this thing is pretty amazing. Super close, but this thing will not move or go anywhere. I'm gonna show you guys. Gabe is gonna do a quick test on this thing. Gabe is literally yanking on this thing and it's not going anywhere. So that is gonna conclude this video.